What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Eric and we are riding dirty. In today's episode we're going to talk about my 2019 Canyon Strive. I purchased this bike back in November of 2019. I wanted to get a bike for the next year. I never had a 29er before, and I just saw a lot of good things about the Canyon Strive, so I decided to get it. This is the Canyon Strive 6.0. It's not the top rated model of the Strive. I believe it's the bottom rated. I don't know. I can't remember, but it's still a really good bike. When you're looking at bikes in this kind of price range, the one thing I have noticed about all these bikes is that most of the components are the same. It's like the frame is the only thing that's different. With all these different frames out there, you can get the same parts. So really at this point, you're just deciding on what frame you like the most in order to buy your bike. So this bike has 160 millimeters of travel. The front forks are the RockShox Lyrics, and in the rear we have the RockShox Super Deluxe. So far, I really like the way this bike rides. I mean, I've never had an enduro bike. This is my very first enduro. I've rode a lot of cross-country bikes. I've rode some downhill bikes, but this is my first enduro, and I have to say it's the best of both worlds in my opinion. You know, you can climb pretty well on this bike, and you can also go downhill even better on this bike in my opinion. I definitely wanted something that would give me more of an all-around purpose. You know, I didn't want to just do trails. I didn't want to do just jumps. I wanted to do both. And you know, the geometry on this bike makes it to where you can do that. You know, that's one of the reasons why I really decided to go with this bike besides the color. As you can see from my previous videos, I mostly jump. At this point in time, I'm not a big climber. I'm a pretty short guy, only 5'7", and climbing is not one of my strong suits. It's brutal for me to climb hills. And I'm a pretty stocky guy, so you know, trying to push all that weight uphill, it's not fun. You know, I only do the uphill because I want to do the downhill. So, you know, that's why I got the Enduro, because it has the granny gears in the rear and you can climb, get the climb over with and go send that downhill for lots of fun. One of the unique things about this frame is it has a thing called the Shapeshifter, which is a button you can push to change the geometry of the frame. So if you're climbing, it'll make it more stiff. If you're going downhill, it'll make it more plush. And basically what it is a little shock that goes above the rear suspension that can change the travel. Right here, you fill this up with air. You can fill it up from 50 to 200 PSI. I like to fill it all the way up so I can actually feel the difference when the shock moves back and forth. So Canyon, the bike company, teamed up with Fox to make this happen. So here it is in regular mode, and then here it is in extended mode. Just gives you a little bit more or less travel. So now I want to talk about the components that I actually changed. Number one, I changed the stem. I wanted a deity stem. I like how they're really short as far as how far they extend out, and it's just a tiny bit shorter than the stock one that came. The other thing that I changed out was the stock handlebars. For me, I personally like a higher rise on my handlebars because it makes me feel more like motocross bars and BMX. I'm used to riding those more than, say, mountain bikes, so this is why I changed those. So I wanted to feel comfortable on it and how I normally feel on a bike. The other thing that I changed was the saddle, because the saddle that came with it wasn't as soft. It wasn't terrible, I just didn't like it as much. It didn't fit me very well, so I also bought a deity saddle as well. And the last thing that I changed was the pedals, because the pedals that came with this bike are horrendous. This is what came with this $3,000 bike. How embarrassing is that? I mean, I'm not gonna lie, there's better pedals on bikes that come from Walmart. Just saying. Can you imagine riding these pedals on a brand new $3,000 bike that you just bought? No. So I got rid of them. Ended up just buying some pedals from Amazon that I like, that match the color of the bike, and they're nothing special. They're just some regular flat pedals, and I'm totally cool with that, because me personally, I would much rather buy, you know, a set of pedals that are, you know, 30 bucks that I'll just thrash and eventually not feel bad that I ruin them, or spend $300 on some pedals and potentially thrash them and feel really upset that I ruined them. So there's my answer for that. Like I said before, this bike does climb very well. I'm just not a good climber. But you know, the fact that the frame is carbon fiber, it makes it a lot lighter than any other frame. I will say though, I was worried about buying carbon fiber. This is my very first frame I've ever owned that is carbon fiber, and I was worried about the structure of it breaking. You know, I've never had one. I didn't know how strong they were, so I kind of just took a chance and went for it. I have definitely bottomed out on this thing, cased a few jumps, and crashed it a couple times as well. And it can take a beating, so I'm stoked about that. Another thing about this bike is that it's a 29er, and I really wanted a 29er. I had never ridden a 29er before until this bike, but everyone kept telling me how a 29er is so much faster and it can roll over anything, and it's a lot less effort than a 26. I will say that all bikes have their place on different terrains, but for what I do, the 29er is awesome because I can climb things, I can go downhill, and it just sucks up any of the chunk that I'm going through, and I love that about this bike. A couple of people have asked me how I like to run my suspension. Well, for me personally, I like my suspension super stiff. I don't like to have it really plush because then I feel like every time I'm pedaling, I'm just losing so much energy. Well, on top of that, when I'm jumping, I like my bike to feel very sturdy. You know, I've rode most of my life on BMX bikes, so I like that rigid feeling. So I run my suspension at full max PSI that I can. So in my front forks, I have spacers in there. I think I have 4 volume spacers in there. And I still run it at like 115 plus PSI in my front forks. And then my rear shock, max PSI is 325, and I run it at least 275. So I have a pretty stiff bike when I'm jumping around. For me, it just feels better. I'm used to it, and you know, it reminds me of my BMX bike, and so that's why I run that. One of the unique things about Canyon is that they're a direct-to-consumer company. So when you buy the bikes from them, you're not buying them at a shop. They come directly from the factory, and I think there's one shop that's in Carlsbad, California, and that's the only shop I know that sells Canyons. Other than that, you have to buy them online. I will say they ship pretty quick. I got my bike in under a week from California, I believe it came from, and I'm in Arizona. And you know, it's kind of weird buying a bike that you can't try out, but that's kind of the risk you have to take when you're buying these like bikes from the companies direct, where you can't get it from a shop. Being my first 29er, I didn't like it at first. When I started pedaling around this bike, like I just felt like it was way too big. And this is a size medium frame, and I'm 5'7". And I'm not gonna lie, I had a little bit of buyer's remorse in the beginning that I didn't think I was gonna keep this bike. The cool thing about Canyon is you can return your bike within 30 days. As long as you don't like destroy it, they'll take it back. I was really debating up until the last few days, and you know, I decided to keep it. This bike is not the best bike just for pedaling around in your neighborhood, but when you get this thing on a trail, this thing is a beast, and that's what I love about it. Because at first I was uneasy, unsure whether I liked it, and then once I got it on the trail, I was 100% satisfied. I knew this was my bike that I loved, because as soon as I got on the trail and I started going fast and hitting a bunch of chunk rocks everywhere, it was just like, oh wow, this thing does like superb. I felt like I was on a motocross bike, you know, just not as fast. So that's my main thing. You know, if you're kind of hesitant about getting a 29er, pedaling it around the street, pedaling outside the shop is not gonna do anything. You have to get it out on a trail and try it out that way. You know, I know a lot of companies do demo bikes and all that stuff. I would definitely say try that if you can, but for me, I just took the risk and I had great results. In my opinion, if you can get your hands on a Canyon Strive, I definitely would get one if I were you. It's a good bike, and you know, it's reasonably priced, especially because most bikes out there these days that you want to get something decent is, you know, you're looking at $3,000 to $8,000. With that being said, I will say that Canyon is just as good as any other brand out there, and you know, they're a huge company. They're just not that popular here in the US, but eventually they're gonna be here and probably be one of the #1 bikes that you can buy. Well, that's it for today on the review of the 2019 Canyon Strive. If you like what we do here on the channel, hit that like button. If you wanna see what we're up to next, hit that subscribe button. And always remember, start small and go huge. Thanks for watching.